Hello and welcome to the first of my new line of videos, looking at new products, techniques and anything I feel like recording really. A bit more time in my hands with childcare, so I get to do a bit more content on a Monday. So I'm hoping that I'll do a new video every Monday. That's basically the goal. Today's video is the new, which it's been out for a few weeks, but I've been trying to get my hands on it. It's the new Army Painter wet palette. Now, I'm a sucker for wet palettes. I love wet palettes. I use them pretty much with every job. I very rarely use a dry palette anymore. And when I saw it, I thought, yeah, that looks pretty good. So I wanted it. So nice box. It's quite chunky for a box. Smaller than a couple of my wet palettes, but it's still a nice size. You do get a couple of free guides. So using their washes, which Army Painter do some of the best washes. They also do a dip as well, if you've ever heard of a dip, which is like an instant wash. Or maybe I'll do another video on that at some point. But yeah, you get a nice guide, some ideas about what they do, some tools and risks and safety and how to use certain things, which is really nice if you're a beginner. Just sort of simplified instructions, just to make things, because it's quite a big world, as we know, of miniatures, and it's good to see some nice simplified instructions to get people involved. And just you showing what products they have, which there is Army Painter has a vast stock of products, from tools to paints to brushes, and they do some very nice brushes as well. And my favourite thing are the tufts. I use the tufts in a lot of my basing because they're really good quality. They stick down really well. But yeah, I really like Army Painter stuff. But I didn't know until I saw a video that they were going to release a wet palette. So this is all good. This is great for me. So here's the case. Comes with a nice strap to keep it nice and secure. I've lost the one on my other one, so it's nice to have a new one. It's really nicely done. Really nice gloss black. Good decent size for now. It's a bit small for me to use in the studio, as I may have 3 or 4 jobs on at once. Yeah, it's a good size for traveling. Technically, you get 2 trays as well, because you could use that as a wet palette as well because of the shape. Let me just check I've got everything in focus. I'm going to move up the camera slightly. There we go. All right, so that should be everything in. And what's nice about it is that for travelling and just for while you're working, you've got a nice little space for brushes here. You could do the glazes in this section, and this is your main, obviously, water pot here. But again, you could use this as well, which I'll do in another video. Is basically just how to create your own wet palette. I got this from Goblin Gaming for just over £15. I think it retails at 20. I could be wrong, but yeah, I got this from Goblin Gaming, as they're doing a discount on Army Painter product, which is really nice. So thank you, Goblin Gaming. Really appreciate the speedy delivery. So if we open this is the main gubbins of it. So the read before use, but that's a little bit more detail, and also it's really important. This is really nice, actually. It's how to look after your brushes, and that's really important. I'm a bit of a brush wrecker, I'm afraid. I should take more care of them, but I don't. So I have quite a large stock of brushes, and also a bit about how to prepare your paints, which is really nice. I think that's a really nice little addition. So we've got our Hydra Foams here, 2. You come with 2 Hydra Foams. I think, depending on how much you use it, if you're just a casual painter, I think these will probably last you a good few months, if not more. Obviously, paint spillage and second effect them. Make sure you dry them out, because otherwise you can get mould. They do their best to protect them, but you know, water will find a way to stagnate. I've made that mistake before. But yeah, these are really nice size, that if we open one up, they will fit perfectly into the black box. So we'll open them up, nicely sealed. And they've even got the nice logo on it, which is cool. And then, so if we move this. So building the wet palette is essentially this. So you'll have your bottom tray, then you'll have your Hydra Foam, and then you're gonna I'm just going to use a water, and you're going to wet it. But you don't want to over wet it. You want it to be nice and moist. You can always pour some out if you overdo it. I use one of these because I can see how much water I'm pouring on. Don't just pour a glass of water onto it. And if you run over, it's not a problem. Let it soak in for a couple of minutes. About 30 seconds. Let it soak in and then pour out any excess. I keep a bucket handy next to me just to do that. So while that's soaking up, we can look at the other section, which is the paper. Now, they've given me 50, which is great, but I will go through these very quickly because if I'm doing a single job, one bit of paper will do a single job, because I don't want my paints mixing together. And if it's overly wet, I definitely don't want paints mixing together, or if I add too much water by accident, I don't want them spreading into another job's paint. So I will keep each unit or project that I'm working on to one bit of paper. But if you do run out, you can use baking parchment, the white or the brown. There's two types. If you're a baker, you probably know. One's grease proof and one's baking parchment. Both do the same, because what the difference is they're almost water resistant. These aren't meant to be wet. These are meant to be moist. Some people may not like that word, but they're meant to be moist to keep your paints wet. The actual use of a wet palette is twofold. Originally, people started using them for blending. So because it kept the paints wet, it would make blending much easier to get smooth, translucent colours. Now, that's a little bit oversaturated, so I'm going to pour some water out, because I don't want excess water in it, because that will make my paints too wet, and then you'll be applying constant washes, which isn't what you want. So we're going to lay the parchment over as neat as you can, even though that was me not being very neat. And you're just going to try and smooth out those bubbles and get it as nice as you can. Now, the idea of the wet palette is to prolong your paint. So say you're working on a project, excuse me, say you're working on a project that you know you're not going to finish tonight. You may start it up tomorrow morning, it may be tomorrow afternoon, but you need to remember what paints you've used. This is where the wet palette comes in. So if I was to put some paint on this, which I will, I'll do a quick test on one of my Stormcast here. So, yeah, that's doing nicely. Smooth out a bit more. What it will do is it will, in most cases, depending on how much water you put on, it will keep the paint nice and wet and still usable the next day. For usually, I've come back to paint 24 hours later and it's still been as it was out of the bottle. So let's give it a go. So what have I got to work on my Stormcast? Let's take a nice blue. I'm going to take scale 75. Innsmouth blue. Oh dear. Add a bit there. And I'll grab my brush, and all I'm going to do is just do a quick demo. So I like to just add a little bit of water onto my palette, because again, it's not meant to keep the paint wet. It's not meant to thin the paints. It's meant to keep them as they are out of the bottle. So I'm just going to keep adding paint until I get the consistency I want with a bit of water. It's a nice size. I actually really like it for size. I think I'm going to use this for to take it with me to tutorials and sessions, because it's a nice compact case. Comes with everything I need. I can repack it. And what's really nice, I tell you what, this is what's really nice, is it has layers. So I don't have to worry about my paper getting, if I need to take extra paper, I can store it in here, or I can store it in the lid. It's not that I have to put it back onto the case and risk it getting wet or carry kitchen towel around with me. It's actually a really nice design. Yeah, it's keeping the paste nice and thin, not drying out. It's like I say, a good size. You might be wondering, wow, that's thin. Yeah, I do tend to work quite thin. I'm not going to make this video too long. I just wanted to show off the Armour Painter wet palette and just show you what it's meant for, which is to allow you to keep your paints wet enough that you could come back to them the next day. That's essentially what it's for. But yes, it does make good for blending as well. If you keep it very wet, it will keep it thin enough that you can do some nice blending and keep those blending patterns that you'll do on here. But I really like the fact that I can have my brushes there, if I could put them in properly. I can have my brushes there just while I'm there, and I can see them all there. It's a nice working environment, nice, clean and compact, and I think that's really important for when, you know, if you don't have a very large working space or you're working away from your normal working space, you need that sort of ability to work as comfortable as you can. I don't know if you can hear it, but my wife is currently singing downstairs. I can hear it. I hope you can too, because that would be hilarious. So yeah, so that is the Army Painter wet palette. It is a lovely bit of kit. I'm thoroughly impressed with the design. I think the design's one of the best. Let's say I've got 4 or 5 pre-built wet palettes, and this is probably the nicest design I've seen in a wet palette. I honestly do. The fact that it's again, it's a decent size for what you need. You don't need, I mean, as a comparison, this is the one I use on a day-to-day basis. See, it takes up the entire screen. That's the one I use daily. And you can see that, oh, sorry. You can see the size difference. So yes, it's a standard sized wet palette. You wouldn't need to go any bigger if you're working from, you know, if you're just working on individual projects or you're just a casual painter. I would recommend getting a wet palette, just to try, but I will do a video on making your own to get used to the process of it. Yes, these are professional ones, as in they're built to do a singular job, which is be a wet palette. But with a Tupperware pot, some kitchen towel and some baking parchment, you can make your own wet palette. And I will do a video on that and show the benefits of it. But I love a pre-built wet palette. It makes life so much easier for me, a lot less hassle, a lot more control. So I'm really happy with the design. I love the black and red colours. I think that's a really nice colour design as well. The Hydra Foam fits nicely. The paper's nice and thick, so it doesn't break or tear when it gets wet. And still my paints are not drying out. If you're wondering why it's a bit goopy, this paint has been quite old, and it's still managing to be thinned down on the wet palette. And I could probably come back in a couple of hours, seal it up, and it would be as wet as it is now. If it isn't, 2 reasons: there's not enough water on the foam, or the paper hasn't been left long enough to absorb the necessary amount. So make sure that you should have a thin layer of water over the foam, a very, very thin layer. You should be able to move the water around when you do it. So make sure if you're buying a pre-built one with a foam, make sure you do that. With kitchen towel, just oversaturate it, because kitchen towel is super absorbent. So you need to make it so the water is actually not being absorbed anymore. And again, just a small thin layer over the top. Paper, yep, it's great to have already pre-cut sizes. That's really handy for me, because as soon as my job's done, tear it off, put a bit more water on the foam, new paper, straight onto the next job. So that's really handy for me, which is why I tend to go for pre-built ones, because I find them really, they really help with productivity, which is something I'm really trying to focus on at the moment. So yeah, that is, so if I put this back, it will all fit nicely together. Remember, if you're going to tip it upside down, you might have a problem. So if you are going to travel with it still wet, just be aware of how much water you've got in it, because you may find that you have a puddle. I've done that before, where I've put a wet palette in my bag and then left a puddle behind me as it's soaked through. So yeah, that is the Army Painter wet palette. Thank you, Army Painter. It's a really great one. Really enjoying it. Can't wait to use it more. Really enjoyed having a play with it before this video, sorry. But yeah, it's going to become quite an essential part of my kit for when I do my tutorials. I have a tutorial on Sunday. I'm going to be bringing this with me so that myself and the client I can show him how a wet palette works. And also we can share half and half. So we're going to be working on the same colours because it's going to be a tutorial session. And it will be nice and compact for me, and it's not a lot to carry. I can keep my brushes in there. Yeah, great product. I've got several more that I'll probably give a review on. This is great for size. This one here, this is about £18, and it comes with the foam and the paper. But for size, this one's really useful to me. So this is the only reason why I'll be using this more, because I'll have 3 jobs on at once, so I'm able to separate it out. But this will now come with me on sessions and probably with tutorials as well if I'm working long distance on tutorials. So I hope this video has been helpful. You can get this from Goblin Gaming, as I've said. Yeah, give it a go. I'll do another video on creating your own wet palette. But if you do have a wet palette, use it. If you're a bit worried about it, send me a message and I can guide you through the process. It's once you've learned it, it's simple and it will really increase your productivity. But it's a bit weird at the start to get used to the idea of it. So yeah, happy Wednesday. This video will go up as soon as possible with my new intro, which I'm really happy about. And thanks for all the positive comments. And I shall see you soon. So from Squiggle Studio and me, Mike, see you soon.